resistance goes on all the time. It has to. Okay? You really don't want to pay that sales tax. It's like, I'll eat a penny. They look like 6 1/3 pennies. Because that's why they denied extending the income tax credit for a child. Well, they didn't want to extend that for people who make minimum wage. Because Republicans say, why should we give the tax break to people who don't pay income tax? Well, they pay Social Security tax and unemployment insurance in a higher percentage than anybody else. Sales tax takes up more of their income than it does for anybody that doesn't pay income tax. No, I mean pays income tax. Wait a minute, loopholes, that's right. Oh, the lawyer class. Jesus, I want a Mercedes-Benz too. Because see, that's how we forget. We get so wrapped up in our position within the climb or the potential climb through the corporate ladder that we forget what it is that it's all about. And I mean life and all that jazz. Because it becomes a pursuit of just money. Because, well, nothing really matters except for how many zeros are on that check, no matter what I have to do for it. Because everybody who thinks that way forgot. They forgot what life and all that jazz is about. And the first time I ever realized that this goes on, as a point of view with blinders on, was right back from my folks' house at the shore, with a family I did not know who lived in the same suburban echelon. And as they drove through one of the more horrendous rural ghettos, and we're talking about a place that up into the 1960s, if you're black, you did not go into town on Saturday. They drove through this, and all they saw was the potential real estate value. They didn't see the closed buildings. They didn't see the people. They didn't see the graffiti. All they saw was the potential real estate value. And I actually did meet a young yesterday. He just does real estate, but specialized real estate. Check this one out. Apartment house sales. So he sells stuff to people who just make money owning that stuff without actually doing anything productive. Oh, that's right, there's inflation. There has to be inflation. Thomas Jefferson said if you're going to have money, you're going to have inflation. Well, it costs money to have money, so you got inflation. And then you devise banking and you have checks. Well, that costs money, so your money costs more money. And then they invent credit cards. And those are really expensive money. But it's okay. It's okay to have personal debt. It's okay because it's okay for the government to have personal debt. Or government debt. So that's it. I'm cut off.
Okay.
Just like my credit.
All right, everybody, give it up for John Emmons with a capital E. Next group.
Okay. Let's get this straight. If you operate under the illusion that you have privacy, you're putting yourself in a dangerous situation. Everything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. And ever since the Supreme Court said that cops could lie, he comes to the distinct conclusion that whatever rights we had that were dreamt up somewhere between the Articles of Confederation and the Magna Carta, and, oh, yeah, that's it, I remember the Bill of Rights! Yeah! Wow! Well, you gotta understand, if they're gonna say things like that blatantly, then you best believe that document what is meaning anyway in a world of disposable consumerism? I mean, Walmart's a great example of this one. So you're really worthless shit for really cheap. And it falls apart, so you have to buy some more of it. And this is the idea of planned obsolescence. This is how this country and the economy through the 50s and 60s lost its competitive edge because they invented this thing called planned obsolescence. You made things fall apart because the market was limited, so you had to keep stimulating it because it was falling apart. And now we got to the point where we don't even need to repair people anymore. You just trash them. Well, that's, that's why I'm in the world. Because I have a piece of 4-inch by 4-inch thick layers of plexiglass bolted together, piece of artwork buried about 600 feet inside of this massive hill they're building in New Jersey. And the trucks drive up it, and the trucks drive down it. 24 hours a day, all of the time, because archaeologists study our garbage pile, and everybody else's, because that's the true essence of a society. And that's how we will be seen as a disposable culture. I think that's why we're trying to make the plastic last as long as possible, so there is a record of us. After a nuclear vaporization, even steel doesn't last more than a little while, Not that that is necessarily a problem. It's a lot quicker population control than some of the other stuff they come up with. Because you realize, of course, that the atom bomb was the second greatest gift God gave to mankind in the 20th century. Though some people say blue's more important. I firmly believe that the atomic bomb, in making war, the kind of war that insurance companies can't pay off on, made war obsolete. That's why they want to go back to testing the really tiny things so they can use them. Hey, man, what good is deterrence, if you don't have the biggest gun? And that gets us around to what Mao said about power in the barrel of a gun. And I'll tell you something, that's when the national nightmare in this society, in this country, started. Was when they blew Jack Kennedy away. Because it was such a horrific nightmare for such we're not talking necessarily an innocent society. This is the people that fought World War II. The bloodiest and nastiest, most vile, concocted shit that the banks and the insurance companies and the corporations ever come up with. Makes the Black Plague look like a Sunday picnic. Population control. Our rights. One of the reasons why you can drink yourself into a stupor and get any pharmaceutical, depressant, tranquilizer, sedative, known to man, work on every different part of your brain. And yet, only cops and politicians since 1977 have been able to get amphetamines. That's why if you do amphetamines, you get busted because it's the drug they are. And they don't like people playing in their little pond, you know. And the reason is because it's all about the hearts and minds of mankind. Nothing short of this total and complete domination. Joseph Goebbels, Nazi Germany, said, if I had Hollywood, I'd won World War II. That's how Reagan got to be president. He was president of the Screen Actors Guild. He was a front man. Read the speech good. And we know he was napping the rest of the time. So obviously, you know, we get back to like, okay, who's actually in charge? Well, in the old days, Rockefellers were basically in charge. As the Rockefellers went, so went the rest of money. And during the 70s, it was estimated that that family controlled $375 billion annually of the American economy. David Rockefeller, supposedly retired, lives in with a worth of only $2 billion. Well, that's money he has in his pocket. How many automobiles do you know? I mean, do people actually have your future in mind? Are people you've never seen? You'll never see them. How would you know that your mind was controlled? How would you know if your mind was controlled? How would you know? You have to break the chains of addiction. That's probably one of them. I mean, that's how Richard Alpert and Timothy Leary basically got asked to leave Harvard, because that's the most notorious and most dangerous drug in the universe, chemical compound, basic brain component, and it is about the war for the hearts and minds of mankind. How would you know if your mind was controlled? How would you know if your mind was controlled? How would you know? How would you know?
The dumbest line. Hey there! Has anyone told you that you look like Charlie? You want to take that one to make for you. You know that one?
Sherman, set the Wayback Machine for 1522. Well, how today, Mr. Peabody?
1522. Magellan, his voyage, circumnavigated the globe. Once they went all the way around the place, there were certain people that said, "No, listen, this is a finite place and we have to own it."
Queen Elizabeth I chartered the British East India Company.
And between the British East India Company and the Dutch East India Company and the Russian Tea Company, they said, "We don't care who's there. We see the land. We're going to take it." And they had a thing called the Bishop's Square, which was 100,000 square miles that were gifted to people who served the companies. This is when they started parceling up this planet. By 1609, when Shakespeare was writing his stuff, he basically was laying down all of the soap operas of modern life. time when the actual, total, absolute control by the ruling classes have been interrupted, offered short setbacks because they are ever vigilant. But there have been successful secular humanitarian revolutions. One of them was this country. How that happened, we have no idea. But it took a lot of thinking and a lot of, concentrated effort. But once they parceled the thing up, they realized, okay, whatever people or whatever's going on there, because you got to understand, before they circumnavigated the globe, the natural course was just to pick up and move. It was infinite. You moved along rivers, you moved along shorelines, you just kept moving. You don't like it here, you just keep moving. But once they basically divided it all up, well, there was always the unknown. However, concerning the unknown, about the 18th century, one of the people in the British East India Company had the experience of a seance in Istanbul, Constantinople, Turkish Guru. And it was communicated to everybody else that the human consciousness can be altered and expanded. So they created a thing called the British Psychical Society, which is basically the controlling element of these larger companies that, even when there were central banks of all the European countries that stimulated the warfare between each of these countries, there were these massive corporations. Okay? We talk about multinationals today. Well, you got to understand, these were multinationals in a time when there were no nations. They created some of the nations. Okay? That's why Thomas Jefferson didn't want a central bank. And Alexander Hamilton, later Aaron Burr, that was the whole argument against the central bank. But now we have the Federal Reserve. And this is the ongoing rant about, when you say, who are they? Well, this is part of the definition of who they is. Okay, there's layers and layers and layers and layers. There's a strong argument that World War II was just a battle for corporate marketplace. These are people over here that are consuming from these particular companies and stuff. Well, we want their trade. And I think that's pretty much, a modern, ancient explanation on another layer of who are they and just exactly what do they have in mind for us. Thank you. Okay. I've got nothing to say, and I'm going to say. I'd like to start off with a definition, what the secular humanitarian revolution is all about. Okay? It's some kind of wrong-headed idea that it's possible, and if we could actually do it, to feed, clothe, and house everybody on the planet. But there's just too many interests that are just from every different way. Look, man, we gotta have homeless people because they're the ones that keep everybody else in line. Okay, so it's literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands, could be millions of different balancing things that are always occurring. But the attempt of the secular humanitarian revolution, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the Wayback Machine to 1968, when in fact the military-industrial establishment was so bushwhacked by the tyranny of the minority, because you got to understand, people who were out demonstrating the war and doing civil rights was by far and away the minority of the population. But man, they were talking and they were saying and they were doing, so it made good news bites. Well, this revolution actually occurred and succeeded. And for one brief moment, everybody looked around at everybody and said, we got the power. You want the power? You want the power? Power corrupts. So we just said, that's it, fine. We did it. We're out of here. Well, reverted back to the power clique of the 50s, running this country under some kind of hangover from manifest destiny or something, you know, what they got after they won World War II. Because what you got to understand is after we won World War II, they said, listen, okay, we're running the world now. Can we teach people how to think? And they really did. During the 50s and the 60s, they answered your questions. If you asked questions in school, they would answer them. They would teach you. They tried to teach you how to think. And you got to understand, my parents' generation, the answer to why was because I said so. Okay? But I remember in the early 70s when they decided to change the educational system because, okay, we got too many sheep, so we need some more sheep. So the first thing that was said, when someone asked a question in class, the professor said, you don't need to know that, it won't be on the test. By the time I went back to school to complete a degree in the 80s, students were asking, do I need to know this? Need to know. Oh no, you don't need to know this. One day I said something about this, and a person literally said to me, and this is in college, I wouldn't say that if I were you. The rest of the statement is, you might endanger your future in corporate structure. Well, of course, the next step is, I wouldn't think that if I were you. Scary. What need for censorship when everybody's self-censoring? Okay, now, what became of certain impulses, the next generation right away. Here I am, like 1969. Hair down in the middle of my back, rainbow top hat, hat pants, blowing in the breeze, man. We're talking like just trucking. Running down the street in a sunny afternoon. Whole school bus of kids go past me and go, hey, how you doing? Hey! And I'm going, hey, how you doing? And as the bus went past, in the rearview mirror was a pair of really black, undreaming insect eyes of the bus driver looking at me. About 2 weeks later, I'm walking down the street being my regular old high and happy self. And when the bus goes by, all the kids are yelling at me, calling me names, and basically throwing shit at me. And I'm like, okay, who got to them? Okay, that was the birth of the yuppies. Okay? Because they were taught from a very young age that all of the ideals, all of the dreams of the secular humanitarian revolution was shit. They're dirty. They got long hair. They're communists. They're biased. They're bad. So every value of the secular humanitarian revolution, peace, love, brotherhood, a non-material view, and you know, I mean, Yogi from Muskogee, we took our trips on LSD. There was a social statement there. Why for entertainment purposes, why for relaxation purposes, are you getting in your car and driving and polluting the environment that you're trying to get to? And we were told by Dow Chemistry, Dow Chemicals, better living through chemistry. Okay, about 1973, one of those voices said to me, so, okay, you think your secular humanitarian revolution was a success? Watch this. Next day, they tripled the price of gasoline. That was the last time, and I mean, man, they tried real hard to discredit counterculture with Charlie Manson and all those images. But you could still hitchhike if you didn't have a beard and wore sunglasses. But once they tripled the price of gasoline, that was it. Look, man, I can see you on the side of the road. You're kind of cool, but I can't afford to slow down, pick you up, and reaccelerate. Okay? And when they triple the price of gasoline, a gallon of milk triple. A loaf of bread. Yeah, man, it's okay. You can stay at my house, but don't go in the refrigerator. Okay? So, by asserting as their last-ditch attempt, man, because they tried cannons and dogs and water cannons, it's the last-ditch attempt to maintain control. We just fucked everybody. And I'll tell you something. Part of that secular humanitarian revolution, well, we really did piss off the multinationals because we said things like, those copper miners in Chile, they're working for 25 cents a day. Well, of course, we were slightly wrong because 25 cents a day in that culture was a whole fucking lot more money than $100 a week minimum wage in this country. But because that secular humanitarian revolution was founded, thought up, dreamed up by basically upper middle class kids who had enough time and enough energy to spend time on long philosophical discussions. Because, the wolf wasn't at the door. Okay? So, the perspective of a lot of that, when it appealed to, when it, was applied to the worldview, was skewed by an American, sensitivity. Well, those multinational corporations have never forgot what we did. And that's why it's their direct responsibility to punish us by turning America, sweet America, into just another third world country. Terrorism is a form of warfare. War terrorizes. What is a war on terrorism? That's when I get in trouble the most, is when I ask questions. And early on, I was told that it's the writer's job to answer any question he asks during the telling of the tale, whatever. Okay, now I'm going to go flip a track here and go back into one of my favorite subjects, which is the decrepitude of the educational system and how this actually happened. Some of you that know me know my story of the birth of the yuppies. Well, this is how they were educated. One of the facets of the humanistic secular revolution when it occurred to the educational system and the student strike of like 1970 and the emergence of pass-fail and the fact that you could actually drop courses and stuff and instead of taking required rote subjects, we had been given so many rote subjects for so long that we wanted something more stimulating, something more open, and yet when we got rid of rote learning, we ended up with a couple of generations of dummies. Because I'll tell you something, vocabulary is one of the single most important things to the human mind. Because if you have a limited vocabulary, you have a limited thought structure. The larger your vocabulary, the larger your worldview, and the ability with that comes the ability to make sound choices. Okay? Well, one of the other things that happened to the educational system was a draft deferment that happened during Vietnam, where you didn't have to go to war if you became a teacher. So you got an entire generation of people in education whose only reason for being in education is because they're cowards, and their only real ability is to give children nightmares. You will conform. If you get creative, they just might put you in a room by yourself and tell you to sit still. Well, in my case, because I did this early on, even before there were school psychologists, you know what they used to say to me? John, why don't you go outside and draw trees? And everybody was like, how do you get that gig? And it was because I didn't even believe at that time in the question answering thing. I just say out the answer. But everybody else was raising their hand. They had to get rid of me. Oh, you think you can teach this class better than me? Well, get up and do it. And I would. And, well, I'd be back outside drawing trees. Woo! I've been questioned before about, and by the DOE, about the restructuring of the nuclear community, and everybody has these concerns about fissionable material. Well, the same way that they control the production of nuclear things is the same way that they learn to control the production of LSD. To get really pure, strong LSD, you need a laboratory, industrial-grade centrifuge. That's why during the 60s and into the 70s, grade LSD came out of the chemistry labs of every major university. Well, when they made chemistry labs high security, they were able to monitor that equipment. That's exactly what they do to monitor any possibility of making a nuclear device, because you need these intense machine tools that you can't get. Okay? Because, of course, you got to understand that the linkage between the atom bomb and the ability to destroy the planet is on equal par as a God's gift to man as LSD. And you got to understand the circumstances. Why go to a foreign country and fight and kill somebody that you don't know when you can eat ass and go into your closet, fight yourself, and take care of business? This is very, 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 very dangerous to the order and nature of the structure of what we call corporate lockdown. But I want you to know that I think unemployment and being laid off from major corporations is probably the best thing that can happen to most Americans. Because I'll tell you something, and I've discovered this, working for somebody else, punching somebody else's clock makes you mortal. It kills you. And the only way that you can touch your immortality is working on the great work. And I don't mean plastic immortality or being Bob Dylan. I mean the moment of creation is a time when the machine is no longer pushing time, but you as a creative being has the ability to stretch time. Open up big pockets in it through the power of your concentration. Woo!
All right, everybody, that was John Emmons.